Hello everyone, my name is Tadej Blažič and I'm a freelance 3D designer. Today we work on the fourth and final part of our series, lighting, texturing and rendering our animation. We'll be looking at different material types from simple principled to PBR materials, and we'll be learning a lot of new and useful shortcuts and processes that will speed up your workflow. We'll also light our scene, create custom mesh lights and finally set up and render our scene. I'm using Blender 2.79 shortcuts, but I'll be overlaying relevant Blender 2.8 shortcuts whenever it's necessary. So let's get into the video. So this is where we left off last time. Now it's time to start setting up our materials. Before we start setting up our materials, I would like to do a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to go into my wireframe. I'm going to select the grass and the curves, and I'm going to move them out of sight. Also, don't forget to close your auto keying so you don't mistakenly key the objects. Now I'm going to focus on my scene here. So first thing I want to do is I want to change my render engine here in the render properties to cycles. I'm going to change the device to GPU compute, and I'm going to change the sampling to 200 samples. I'm also going to open the light paths and I'm going to increase the volume to 20 because we will be using a volume material. I'm going to lower the indirect light to 4.5 or around 4.5 and filter glossy to 1.5. This kills a lot of noise in the image so we don't have to overdrive our denoising. I'm going to go down here, color management, and I'm going to change it to medium contrast. I'm also going to go into my layout properties, or rather output properties, and I'm going to set the render region. This means that when we add a camera to the scene, we will only see whatever is in the camera rendered out. I'm going to go to the world properties, and here I will click on color, so the little circle on the right, and I'm going to choose environment texture. This means that I will be loading an HDRI and choose an HDRI of my choice. Now if I go into rendered mode, Shift Z, I can see the HDRI is working. Press Z to go back into solid mode, and now we can actually start adding our materials. This was just to set up a couple of preview options. Shift S, cursor to world origin, because I will be adding a background type of plane. So I'm just going to go Shift A, mesh plane, scale up. So it's wide enough, like so. Now I'm going to press 5 on the numpad. So I'm in orthographic view. I'm going to find a good angle where I like my subject. Shift A, add a camera. Control Alt 0 on the numpad to position the camera where my view was. In the camera tab, I can now choose the type from perspective to orthographic, and I have this. The orthographic scale is how you adjust the zoom, and now I also want to have it in 180 by 180, so I'm just going to correct the resolution in the layout properties. You can also, if you have your camera selected, press G and move the camera around so you position it correctly. Just adjust the orthographic a bit closer, like so. If we press Shift Z, everything gets rendered. So we want to get rid of that. So I'm just going to click Render Region in my output properties. Now it's time to start adding some materials. My suggestion is, if you're ever lost with materials, go to either UI gradients or use Adobe Cooler to get some really nice gradients. Now let's start off with our backdrop, the pedestal and the background. I'm going to split the screen again, and I'm going to choose the shader editor. I'm going to press N to hide that menu. I'm going to choose the pedestal, and I'm going to add a new material. And I'm going to name this material Pedestal. So I want to go into my render view, Shift Z, and I want to start choosing my base color. I want to have a pinkish type of color, like a very soft pastel almost color over here. And I want to apply the same color to the background. I'm going to select the background, Shift select the pedestal, and then click on the right, and then choose this drop-down menu, copy material to select it. and this is going to copy the material to my background plane. I don't want any reflections on my plane, because if I lower the roughness, there will be some reflections. I don't want a lot of that, so I'm just going to drop it to 0.4, maybe increase the specular and increase the specular tint. The specular tint is what hides the highlights from the specular and the roughness. When I have something that I'm happy with, I then can start on my plane. For our plane, we'll use a different approach. We'll use PBR materials. Good source for PBR materials is textures.com. You have lots of free options that are lower resolution, and if you want to, you can spend credits and have 4K resolution textures that are really cool. So I'm going to select the body of my plane and I'm going to add a new material. This material is going to be named, let's say, plane body. If you ever saw a tutorial on setting up PBR materials, you know that we need a lot of image textures, we need to set up a lot of materials. However, there is a much easier way. We can just select our principal BSDF, Shift-Control-T, and this will open up our Blender file view. In that view, you go to the folder where you have your textures, you select all of the textures, and then you just click on Principled Setup. And this immediately adds the PBR texture to your material. We also want to UV unwrap our objects so the material falls on it really nice. We're not going to do anything too difficult, just tab into edit mode, press U, and Smart UV Project, set the angle limit at 65 and press OK. And this is going to set your material correctly. One thing that we can do is we want to change this color to be blue, for example. Now you can see that our base color is using a node. And if you take it off, you see that it becomes white. Now, how can we change this to blue? We're going to leave the base color in. I'm just going to change that for a albedo map. And then I'm going to Shift A, add a mix RGB node, bump the albedo to the bottom node, change the mix to multiply, factorial to 1, and then I'm going to set this whatever color I want. For example, a nice light blue. That's going to contrast the pink in the background. I also think that the strength is just a bit too much, so I'm just going to lower it down. We also have a displacement map here, so we can also lower the displacement map down. I'm just going to lower the scale to 0.1. Mid-level, it's fine, and strength, it's fine. After I've adjusted the strength, I'm also going to add the normal to the clear coat normal, and I'm also going to add just a bit of clear coat. If we want to, we can basically copy the same material to our wings and to our back plates. For example, we can choose our wings, we can shift select our body, and then in our drop-down menu, we just copy the material to select it. And this is going to copy directly on our plane wings. However, we have a bit of scaling issue over here, mainly because we're also still applying our mirror. So we can try to apply our mirror like so. Now, if we go into material view, where we don't have all of those reflections and everything, we can see that it's nice and uniform. 0 to go back into your camera view, rendered view, we can see that it's working quite nicely. Let's do the back plates now. I want to do the same material, but I'm just going to change the color. Select the wing, and I'm going to go into that drop-down menu on the right and select copy material. I'm going to select one of the back plates. I'm going to set a new material, and I'm going to rename it to back plate, for example. And I'm going to paste the material. So this means that I have moved the material from the wings directly to the back plate. I'm going to shift select the other two plates, and then I'm going to again select the plate with the material, drop down menu, copy material to selected. However, now, if I want to, I can change the color to, let's say, a nice glowing red. Basically what we did is we copied the material, but it's not going to change the material on our body and our wings. Now that we have our body done, we're going to set up the metal. I'm going to choose the engine part, and I'm going to add a new material. This new material is going to be, let's say, engine. I'm going to again use the same trick with Shift-Control-T, and I'm going to add my material. In my case, this is like a chipped type of metal. Again, we have to unwrap. I've done this previously, so I'm just going to again show you in edit mode. You choose the engine, go into edit mode, choose everything with A, press U, Smart UV project, angle limit at 65, and then press OK. And this is going to unwrap your object approximately. It's not 100% accurate, but it's good enough for what we need. I'm also going to drop down the scale again because I think that the dimples are just a bit too strong for my taste. I'm going to also leave the strength down like so, but otherwise I think they're working well. Choose the rivets, choose the engine, copy material to select it, and we have our material copied. Do the same thing with our nose. So I'm just selecting the nose, I'm selecting my wings, my back plates, copy material to select it, and we have them in front. The next two materials are going to be dead easy. So for the propellers, I'm just going to add a simple, very simple black material, just dropping it down, maybe decreasing the roughness to about 0.1, and I'm just going to copy material to select it. And the last one on the plane is going to be the cockpit. The cockpit, we can make it just a nice blue. So for this one, I think I will increase the clear coat. I'm going to decrease the roughness, increase the specular slightly, and increase the specular tint slightly, so I can get these nice smooth reflections. For the grass that we have created, which is on our pedestal, if we choose our pedestal object and go into our grass, you can see it over here. We can go into our grass object over here and we can set up a special material for that grass. We're going to go add a material again. We'll name it grass. Now I'm going to do something a bit different for the grass. I'm going to Shift A, add a color ramp. You can search it in the bar. And now I'm also going to add a object info node. I'm going to connect the random to the factorial and the color to the base color of the principled BSDF. You can also click on the preview so you can see what it looks like. I want to go into my material viewport so I can see what's happening with my material, with my grass material. I'm going to change the black, let's say, to a darker green type. I'm going to add another green that's going to be just slightly lighter. So I'm trying to map out a couple of colors in the same range, approximately the same range. Go into wireframe. I'm going to select the grass with C, and I'm going to copy the material to select it. Now, if we go into our material view, you can see that every blade of grass has a different proportion of green. This is because we are applying a random distribution to the factorial. And if we take a look at the grass in our scene, we can see that it has those different nuances. Basically, this is completely open to you and your interpretation. We can also lighten up the color slightly, so it's more pastel-like. Shift Z into rendered mode. Let's see just approximately what our grass looks like. So I'm just going to lighten it up slightly again. Now, last thing I want to take care of is the clouds. So we'll be setting a easy principled volume material for the clouds. I'm just going to add a new material. I'm going to name it clouds gray, for example. And I'm going to delete the principled BSDF, Shift A, search for volume, and I'm going to add a principled volume. Now I'm going to connect the volume to the volume socket. And if we go into rendered view, you can see that we don't have that much density. So we want a thicker cloud. If we want a thicker cloud, we just bump up the actual density. This is still a bit gray, so let me correct the color. However, we have this very annoying clipping effect over here, which is very easily solvable. I'm just going to select the enclosure, go into the object properties so it's visible in the viewport. I'm going to select everything, press Ctrl N, and then exit edit mode. Showing viewports, I'm just going to unclick that. And if we return to the rendered view, we can see we have no more clipping issues. So I'm just setting a simple principled volume, maybe play around a bit with the density. Maybe we want a fluffier or more transparent cloud. Let's leave the density at 11 for now. I'm just choosing the rest of the clouds, shift clicking on my cloud material, and then copy material to select it. And we have both materials copied. Now if we make changes, they will be applied all over the board. For the last actual thing, I will be changing just a bit the lighting. So this is just my, say, not primary lighting, but with this I'm just checking what's happening. I'm going to choose a different, let's say a different HDRI, maybe something like this. And now HDRIs, if you want to manipulate them, you can go in the top box over here, change from object to world. Click on your image texture, Control T, and this is going to add a texture and mapping node. If you rotate the Z down here in your mapping node, you can actually rotate the orientation of your HDRI map. Find a nice sweet spot, somewhere where you think your subject is well lit or has an interesting vibe to it. I'm looking for something like really dreamy, something like very morning-like almost. So I'm just switching around and trying to find where it has nice reflections. I think I like this angle over here because I have like these nice white reflections on the edges. I have these nice white highlights on the top of the plane, and that's it. Last thing we want to do here is we want to add a mesh light. I'm just going to make it on my own. So I'm going to Shift A, add a mesh. I'm going to add a plane. I'm going to pull back this plane just so it's out of frame. Rotate it on the y-axis by 90 degrees. Let's pull it up slightly. Maybe pull it even further back on the x-axis. And I'm also going to resize the background slightly. I'm just going to scale the background. I'm going to now set up a emission shader for that plane. Then I choose the materials, add a new material. This is going to be my key light. Now I'll delete the principled BSDF. I'm going to add a emission. I'm going to add a black body, and I'm going to connect them color to color. Add a mix shader. Connect the shader to the surface, emission to the first socket. I'm going to add a diffuse BSDF and connect it to the bottom socket. Increase the roughness to 1 and make the color black. Shift A, and again, add a geometry node. Back facing to the factorial. So this is how it should look like. So the side that's turned towards the plane should be orange and the other one should be black. Let's increase the strength to 5, and I'm going to increase the temperature to 6000. So we have this nice fill light coming from the bottom right of our screen. You can also duplicate this, maybe move it around, maybe create some interesting reflections, like different types of reflections, drag it back slightly. But this is basically going to be it for the lighting. Maybe we can just decrease the overall HDRI. Maybe let's put it to 0.3. So you're pulling back the global illumination. And I'm also really glad that I have the ROG Zephyrus with a RTX, and it's made my life easier when it comes to previewing, also for testing renders and that sort of stuff. It's just perfect. Right now we're going to set up our project to be rendered out. I'm going to start by going to the render properties. I think all of these are okay. We can also increase the contrast in the color management. Maybe medium high contrast would benefit our scene. Next thing I want to do is I want to check if my denoising is on. So I want to go into the view layer properties, denoising. So Optics AI denoising is extremely fast and useful. You can basically render your objects at really low values, like really low sample values. For example, in our first menu, where is sampling. So you don't need crazy amounts of samples. At 200 samples, you can get like really good results. Now to finish off everything, I'm going to go into, again, my output properties. So my resolution is 180 by 180, 100%. Frame rate, everything is okay, and is okay. I just want to choose the color Maybe we can leave it at RGBA, color depth of 16. I usually put the compression at 100. And then I just click on metadata and then I uncheck all of these because these carry a lot of useless information. Choose your output folder. Now, this is going to render out an image sequence. Image sequences, if they get interrupted, you can just start from your previous image. Now that I have set up everything, I'm just doing a final pass to see if everything is okay with my animation. I'm going to go into solid view, just check if there's any clipping or if there's any details that I might have missed or if anything is behaving like it shouldn't. So for now, everything looks good. I think also the loop is working perfectly. If we loop it again, it has nice speed. Maybe we can try and just take one frame from the end frame and see what that does to our, So, and just shorten it for one frame. So we just skip that like nasty little lagging bit. I'm just going to go to the right side of my screen, choose the compositor, use nodes so I can see what's happening here. So this is your compositing layout. We won't be doing a lot in this compositing layout. So in the compositor, I can show you one useful thing. If you don't have the optics denoiser, you can use the denoising data. So you go into your view layer properties, you check denoising data, then you move your nodes to the right. I'm going to Shift A, add another viewer node, Shift A, search and denoise. And I'm going to connect the noisy image to the image, denoising normal to normal, denoising albedo to albedo, and then just split view the image. In any case, you are now ready to render. Now, usually before I go forward with any type of rendering or final rendering, I just do a test final render, just press F12 and I just check if there's any inconsistencies, if there's any problems, if there's something I would like to change. Perfect, so I think I'm going to set it for final rendering. And like I said, thankfully to NVIDIA and optics denoising, I usually get really good results and in really fast times. I'm using RTX 2070 and it does its job beautifully. I can leave it overnight and I can have a solid couple of seconds loop animation the next day. Now you're finally ready to render out your animation by just pressing Ctrl F12 and it's going to render your animation in an image sequence. So hopefully you've learned something in this series. Hopefully you've found some of the suggestions, tips and tricks useful. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. These tools and these tricks should offer you a good basis for making many other types of MoGraphs on your own. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for sticking until the end. Hopefully I'll see some of your creations soon and have a good one.